Good morning, Web Summit. Thank you, Rabble and Will, for joining us. This is going to be fun, and maybe we should start with a show of hands from the audience. How many of us are reasonably familiar with what Nostr is?
No, not a lot.
I see some hands, but I also see a lot of people who would like to know more about it, and maybe that's where we should start. Rabble, what is Nostr?
So Nostr is an internet protocol, a social media protocol that you can build social apps on top of. And it's permissionless and decentralized. So you don't have to get access to a server. There's no centralized control. And it basically makes all kind of social apps work more like podcasting, where you control your relationship to the audience. And
there are a bunch of protocols that are attempting to do this. There's ActivityPub for Mastodon, and Blue Sky has AT. Anything in particular about Nostr that makes it different?
So Blue Sky is optimized for the big public conversation. So there's no concept of private data, and it's very hard to build apps that are not Twitter-like apps. Whereas Nostr is optimized for allowing developers to build all sorts of different kinds of apps on top of it, and allowing for private encrypted communication, not just the public conversation.
Will, you have built one of these apps. Tell us about Damus.
Yeah, so Damus was the first Twitter-like Nostr app. It released in 2023. So still all very new stuff. But it was really showcased just how easy it is to build on this network. I think I built it on a weekend, like in my spare time, and that was when I was convinced that if it's this simple to build a Twitter like app, then a lot of developers could, in theory, get on board with this. And we've seen that. We've seen hundreds of clients get built after Damus.
Yeah, we have hundreds of clients and thousands of developers who've contributed to the Nostr ecosystem.
Rabble, we were talking about the fact that historically, a very high percentage of social experiences have been controlled by a handful of large companies, Meta in particular, but also Twitter is whatever Elon Musk wants it to be. How much of the point here is getting past that and kind of turning the web back to the people?
Absolutely, that's the point. Twitter, when it first launched, was this sort of open API, and you would use Twitter, but you wouldn't use a Twitter app. You would use TweetDeck or Twitterific or things like that. And then in 2012, Twitter was like, oh, I think our business model is advertising, and so we're going to shut down all these third-party apps. And that was the moment I was like, oh, this is a problem that we've given the keys to the kingdom to this single company. And then a few years later, it became really clear that there was a major moderation, trust, and safety problem where you have a single person who gets to decide who has an account and who can say what.
Now, Jack Dorsey was one of the people involved in putting Twitter into that situation, but he also came to reconsider whether that was the best way to do things.
Yeah, absolutely. The early days of Twitter, we actually had a debate. Is this going to be a protocol?
And you should mention your history with Twitter.
Yeah, so I was the first employee. I hired Jack into the company, led the engineering team for the first 2 years, and we had this debate of, can we make it more like a protocol? And we actually built a federated ActivityPub-like thing where you could tweet on Jaiku, that was Google's service, and see them on Twitter and vice versa. But the business models didn't fit that, and the tech didn't scale. So we lost that openness.
I always like the story when Jack says where they didn't even have hashtags at the start, and then it was the users who just came and just added it because it was an open protocol. So I feel like Nostr really restores that original idea where anyone can contribute, anyone can add to it. Actually, Nostr in Latin actually stands for hours, and I think that perfectly represents what this protocol is. It's for the people, it's for developers, and you can extend it. When I joined the network, there was no reactions, there was no reposts, there was no zaps, so I just added them. I didn't have to ask permission from some company to add these features to the protocol. And once I added them, there was all the clients started to adopt them. So that's the beauty about Nostr. It's this growing ecosystem that anyone can extend, and it's getting bigger and bigger.
And they can't take it away from you. So that's what happened when Twitter decided their business model was ads, is they removed the access to these apps, and so that they could make ads. And in Nostr, we have these things called zaps that Will created, which is the ability to do Bitcoin micropayments. between things. So you can pay for services and send someone micro tips, and it gives us a business model that is not the surveillance advertising market.
And Jack has been supportive of Nostr. And he eventually concluded that Twitter should have been a protocol, and he's engaged with helping you.
Yeah, so Jack, I went to Jack in 2018 and I said, hey, you remember that idea of us having a protocol? And we should build one. And he went and said, oh, that's a great idea. And then he tried to convince the other Twitter executives of this. And all of sort of middle management at Twitter freaked out at the idea of them losing control. And it took a couple years until he and Parag were able to fund Blue Sky. And Blue Sky was this sort of very promising initiative. And it's still an interesting platform. But as it grew, they chose to put it under the control of a company that then still had the permission problem that we have with Twitter. And so that's why we switched to working on Nostr, because I don't have to ask anyone's permission to build something on Nostr.
Yeah, and one of my favorite aspects, and this is something that Blue Sky struggled with initially, was like, how do you do moderation? And this is like the #1 question I get on Nostr, is like, how does moderation work? So Blue Sky's approach is just the same approach that Twitter had, it seems like, where you have a centralized moderation team, and they make all the decisions for every single human on the planet, which just doesn't scale. So the way that we look at it on Nostr is that, it's up to the individual, like, you can choose the app, what app you want to, you could choose an app that's like the Wild West, where you get everything, or you have a much more, condensed app where you only see messages from your friends. So Nostr basically delegates that decision to the users and choice versus just a central moderation.
Yeah, and Blue Sky's promise is that they would open it up to alternative moderation systems, but they architected so that it costs you tens of thousands of dollars or more a month in order to run the infrastructure to do your own alternative moderation. So it's not cheap and easy to do.
Rabble, as you mentioned, this is not by any means just about creating things that are in the general domain of Twitter-like experiences. To talk about some of the other things people are building.
Yeah, so once we got this ability to build social apps on this decentralized protocol, we saw this abundance of different things. We saw like blogging apps, and we saw live streaming, and we saw collaborative document editing, and like social wikis, and we saw a bunch of video apps and marketplaces. Almost immediately, we got every kind of Web 2.0 app that appeared, and we got the same exuberance and excitement that existed when social media first existed, which is like, what can I create? What can I do? How can I recombine things?
Yeah, one thing, it just reminds me of the early days of the internet where, you hop onto an IRC channel and it's not controlled, but anyone can set up a server and then you just like find a group of friends and just have fun. I feel like we've moved away into a more corporatized, siloed thing where everything, you're just being advertised to, you're really just like a product. And so Nostr to me represents going back to kind of the older ways of doing things on the internet, like going back to protocols. Like, people stopped doing protocol development, so why? Like, why not go back to this amazing idea where we have these amazing internet we have these amazing networks where anyone can just like freely associate with each other. So I think that's another huge aspect of Nostr that I really like.
How long did it take you to spin up Damus?
Yeah, so it took me about a weekend to get something working. It probably took a year to make it nice and usable. But the fact you can just get something going quickly is one of the best aspects of the protocol.
So you can get some instant gratification. And
yeah, exactly. And if you're a developer, you don't want to spend a month just getting something going. You want to see something work right away. Especially now with AI tools, you can just vibe code a Nostr app, and people are doing this. A good friend of ours, Alex Gleason, he has this platform called Shakespeare.diy, where you can literally just type in, and it'll just like create a Nostr app for you in like a single sentence. So
it's like a social lovable. Like you go in and any kind of social app you want. It could be a recipe app, it could be a MySpace-like app, or anything else. You go in and you describe it, and then it puts it together, and all of a sudden you can collaborate in new ways.
And Alex was actually one of the main, or a huge ActivityPub developer who also switched over to Nostr. So we're seeing people from all these other protocols, they're all kind of congregating toward Nostr because it's so much simpler and there's no permission.
Yeah.
Rabble, you've been working on something. Would you care to tell us about it?
Yeah, so as I was working on Nostr, I thought, well, I should talk to everyone about this, and we should talk about the history of social media. So I launched a podcast, Revolution.Social, and I went and I interviewed Jack, and I interviewed Yoel Roth, who was in charge of trust and safety, and then some influencer types like Taylor Lawrence, and these people kept bringing up Vine. They kept saying, oh, there was this moment where we had this sort of innocent videos that was rooted in real humanity. And I said, well, I wonder how hard it could be to rebuild that on top of Nostr. And just like Will building the first version of Damus in a week, I was able to put it together and bring it back. And then I had this thing where I was like, can we get the old videos? Like, what happened to them? They're no longer on the internet. So I went to Brewster Kale, who runs the Internet Archive, and I said, do you have the Vines? And he's like, well, I don't have all of them, but I have a couple 100,000. And so I just today launched this app. I think we should run the video of it, where we bring back Vine.
Let's see if we can watch that video, please.
They'll tell you you look like Beyonce.
Nah, they usually tell me I look like Shalissa.
Who the fuck is that?
Me, nigga.
Na 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 na, na 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 na, yeah.
That's cute. I wish I could get it.
Oh, don't do it.
So the idea behind this is not just to watch the old videos, which are very funny, but we went back in the archive and we got something that brings a different era of the internet. But you can make new videos. And I wanted, there's lots of interesting things with AI, but so much of my social media feeds, especially on the big platforms, what Meta is pushing, what Elon wants to do with video, what OpenAI has launched, is all this AI slop. And so, you watch the video and then you go look to see if the top comment says this is AI. And it's fine to have that, but I wanted something where we could have a social media platform that had none of that, where users could go in and say, I know this is real. And so we used a bunch of human rights tech to verify that everything that gets shot and published on Vine is a real video shot by a real person, and that it's about trying to get back to that authenticity.
And Vine is kind of a case study in why you don't want large tech companies in charge of everything, because it was acquired by Twitter before it launched, and it was very briefly loved, but it wasn't Twitter's highest priority, and it didn't last very long.
Yeah, and Jack says that his biggest regret of his time at Twitter was the mistake of shutting down Vine. And so, we're working together to bring it back.
I mean, Vine could have been TikTok, although in a lot of ways Vine was a lot better than TikTok because it was not an algorithmically driven monster.
And one of the greatest things about now that you're building this on Nostr, it's really hard for things to die on Nostr, because a lot of the infrastructure is kind of public infrastructure run by a bunch of people, and there's like a lot of redundant servers. So when you launch an app on Nostr, it just tends to work for a long time. It's harder to shut down, just due to the nature of the censorship resistance. And the other benefit is that you just get all the users that are already there. I don't think we mentioned this, but your account works on all the apps, which is crazy. So if you're a developer and you want just like a large number of users that just exist, and you can just tap into them, Nostr provides that. And then you can, and a lot of these apps are interoperable as well. So a Vine posted on this app could show up in my app if I added support for it. So there's a lot of cross-pollination between the apps.
And it's, there's this thing where if you don't like, wow, that's a lot of rain. If you don't like the way in which what videos I host or what my moderation is or everything else, your account is yours. You own it, and you can move it to other apps, and you can choose different media servers to host your content. You can choose different servers to provide moderation, to provide algorithms that you want to use. You're in charge. It's a more human-centered social media experience.
And I think this actually touches a really important part, which is why I think Nostr is going to create a healthier social media landscape, with this idea of algorithms. Algorithms today are designed to just kind of keep you hooked on the app and to make you angry maybe not like purposely make you angry, but a lot of the algorithms are simply built that way because if you engage with content, if you see a fight video on your feed, a lot of people want to click it, kind of like you're watching a train wreck. But these algorithms are being trained to like make us unhappy and angry. So just having the choice where you can switch out your algorithm and go to different apps is, I think, extremely important for the future of just like mental health in general.
Yeah, like, it's not that there's an algorithm that's the problem. It's that we are having an antagonistic relationship with the people making the algorithms. We have no accountability. We don't know why they're doing it. We can't choose what algorithms we have. We can't choose to have the chronological feed of who we follow or something else. And that monoculture is what creates toxic engagement.
And this creates like a free market where people can pick and choose. They can, if they don't like what you're doing, yeah, like what you're saying, you could just go to a different app that's like slightly better, slightly different. So this is going to create a huge marketplace of solutions, and it doesn't have to like destroy your social graph when you switch apps, which is the most important aspect.
Is anybody trying to build businesses on Nostr, or is this really more of a community thing with individuals building things they want to exist?
I mean, there's a lot of people. Yeah, people are building business solutions. There's like marketplaces that people are building. There's like these live streaming services. Like we have a subscription service. We're trying to make ourselves a sustainable business where you can support us with zaps and subscriptions. So there's a lot of like businesses popping up. But it's still very early days.
And I think that that's a critical point. When Twitter decided they needed to make money, the only opportunity to do it was to control the system and run ads. And Twitter was never very good at running ads. But what we have with Nostr is because it's not a blockchain project, it doesn't have its own cryptocurrency, but you can attach and track transactions with Bitcoin. And because of that, we have the ability to handle payments. And we have the ability to connect between people. And so we can build a whole ecosystem of business models that couldn't exist in the sort of first era of social media.
The world we're headed into, so Jack just launched Bitcoin payments on all Square terminals, so you can enable that in the States. So you can do a post on social media, get paid from someone in Africa, and then use that to buy coffee at a Square terminal. And it's like a complete circular economy without ever touching the existing banking system, Visa, or it's just pure peer-to-peer decentralized technology. So that alone is just absolutely crazy, and it's kind of like a cyberpunk future that I'm excited for.
And we think of the credit card processing industry as being this neutral thing of you can use the cards and everything else, but it is actually really judgmental. They charge adult content operators 20 or 30% transaction fees. They prevent a whole bunch of people from doing things that are entirely legal, but they don't like. And so, in the United States, they lock you out of being able to use credit card transactions to buy marijuana, even though buying marijuana is legal. But they give these kind of sin taxes, and that is a really dangerous restriction of free speech that we've sort of accepted.
People who don't know that much about Nostr sometimes associate it with crypto bros, but the fact it's taking payments into consideration gives it the potential to do interesting things.
It's an extensible protocol. It doesn't even, you could do fiat payments on the protocol. You could do crypto payments. We focus on Bitcoin payments. But Bitcoin is not built into the protocol. It's just something that I added because I'm a Bitcoin nerd. But anyone can add any type of solution they want.
But I've released a bunch of Nostr apps, and none of them have wallets or Bitcoin. Yeah. They don't use any cryptocurrency at all.
Will we see Nostr kind of reach a much larger audience, including people who don't even know what protocols are over time?
I mean, that's the reason I went and launched Divine. Like, the reason I was like, here, where's a more innocent internet? Where is a way in which I can just watch funny videos? And I didn't need to understand how the protocol works, or that it is a protocol.
I think once people see the benefits of maximizing their freedom and the idea that you can't be removed, you can run a business without having to worry about some corporation taking you offline. I think all these aspects hopefully people will see that this is the future.
It'll be fun to watch. Thank you so much, Will, Rabble. Thank you, audience, and stay dry, everybody.
Yeah.